Well, hello. Good to welcome you back to another episode of ideasSpace with the Urban Design Group, Urban Nous, and me, Christopher Martin. It's a really important time to be working in the built environment, and I'm hoping that with these conversations we can share ideas to collectively shape better cities and societies around the world. The design of our towns, our settlements and our cities to improve our health and provide a canvas for healthy lives has always been on the minds of urban designers and planners. However, the last few years it really went centre stage in global media. Coupled with this, in the UK, we're pushing for more beauty and development and for more regional urban equality, all whilst considering large reforms to the planning system to better enable this. So has there been a more important time for planning, or indeed a more important time for the RTPI's president? I want to find out, so it's great to be talking today with Wei Yang, planner and urban designer, founder and chairman of Wei Yang and Partners, and of course, president of the Royal Town Planning Institute for 2021. Wei, really wonderful to have you with us. And first, I wanted to ask if you could just sort of tell us about your role and your mission at the RTPI, what your ambitions for the presidency are and for the RTPI going forwards.
Thank you, Christopher. Thank you for inviting me. It's my pleasure to join you. I'm a member of the Urban Design Group, so it's really feels special to join you in the conversation. As the RTPI president, actually, when I stood for my election in 2019, I wrote a manifesto because I took this role very seriously. And I think there are lots of things we need to do to really modernize the planning profession. So I wrote a manifesto and I talk about a revival of spirit for modernize the planning profession. Because I think it kind of covers 2 points. On the one hand, I think planning profession, we started on our own. So it's not a government intervention. So we think actually is how, as a profession, what we can do now to make our world a better place. So I think that's the remit we have. And secondly, because the world have moved on so much, and also the technology and everything else have changed so much. So I think our profession desperately need to be modernized to fulfill the function we should have for the future. So as the RTPI president, in my manifesto, I said the world deserves a modernized planning profession. I want to champion a revival spirit for our profession by enhancing public appreciation of the planning profession, and also strengthen international collaboration on capacity building. And the third is contributing to immediate actions on the climate and the biodiversity emergency. Also, I'm very keen to engage young planners and adopt new technology to empower our modernization. So these are the 4 things I mentioned in my manifesto. So that's very much covered the key themes of my presidency this year. And also because I was trained as architect and urban designer, and I'm passionate about 21st century garden cities. So nature-based solutions is always really very close to my heart, and also about why our profession started. So once I was asked a question to put 3 words related to the planning profession the most, I said it's compassion, selflessness, and creativity, because I think these are the foundations embedded in our profession. Because of my unique experience, because I was trained as an architect, so an urban designer, and also I was a member, I joined as a member of Chartered Institute of Highway and Transportation, because when I was urban designer, I argued with highway engineers quite a lot. So I decided to join as a member of CIHT to be inside to fight with them. So I think as a person, I don't see professional boundaries. And then while I was writing my inauguration speech last year, I read lots of books about the history of the RTPI. I realized actually that was the foundation of the RTPI. When our first president, Thomas Adams, founded the RTPI, he never see the planning profession as a separate profession. He was seeing the RTPI, at the time called the TPI, was a forum for all environmental specialists. So anybody interested into making our city a better place or making our rural communities better actually could join the profession, and then with a very strong social focus. So I think that's the essence of the planning profession. It's really a group of professionals. We want to make our world a better place. So I think that has been my key focus this year. So because I have lots of connections with different professional bodies and also my interest. So I've been doing lots of ambassadorial roles this year to try to connect with different professional bodies and with everybody want to talk about how we can tackle the climate change, how we can tackle biodiversity emergency, and how we can tackle the social inequality issues together. So have been very busy. And because the first half, we were still in the lockdown, so my inauguration speech was broadcast actually worldwide. So I had the privilege of having the president from the Planning Institute's president from American, Australia, Canada, and also the chief executive from UN Habitat join my inauguration. And also, I think after July, I had the privilege. Now we have the freedom. So I've been using the opportunity to visiting as many regions and nations as possible, and especially seeing our young planners and visiting our local authority to see how planners we have been supporting our local economy recovery and supporting the key task of tackling climate change and lots of other issues. And from what I see, I think because of pandemic, people realize the importance of the planning profession, and then people realize how their living environment is related to their health and well-being. So I think it's a very important time for the planning profession. And also the planning reform, the planning white paper was published last year. Actually, that really raised lots of debate within the society, not only within the planning profession. So I think actually that encouraged a lot of discussion and debate and make people much more aware of what planning is about. And now relates to the leveling up agenda and the reshuffle of the government department. I think now we have even bigger opportunity to make a bigger role planning and make it a key vital function to help achieve our vision. So maybe I stop here, and then I would welcome you ask some further questions.
Thanks, Wei. It's a really, really enticing summary, and I really want to get into the questions. And I think I completely agree with you. It's a really important time to be flying the flag for better planning, as you say. I suppose my first question would be, in terms of flying the flag for planning and the planning profession, I sort of often reflect that the public knows, I suppose, relatively little about planning or the role of the RTPI more accurately. I was just wondering why you think that is, and how you think we can better highlight the sort of positive aspects of planning to the public more effectively.
Yes, it's a very interesting question. It's a question I ask myself quite often as well. Actually, that's one of the reasons I decided to suit for election to be the president. It's quite often, for example, if I go to my hairdresser, they ask me, what do you do? I said, I'm a town planner, and they have no idea. And then taxi driver asked me, what do you do? I said, I'm a town planner. They have no idea. And then I explain, say, do you know architects? And then I'm a bigger kind of architect design for cities. And also realize actually sometimes it's quite useful to compare our profession with the medical profession to say, actually, I think we are doctors of cities and towns and villages. So we help to find out or identify the issues and then think about the potentials and then think what are the solutions we can provide to make our world a better place. So I think using that as an example help to articulate what our profession is about. So I think that's why in my manifesto, the first priority I put was really about enhance public appreciation of the planning profession, because planning profession is so important. But quite often, even people know about planning profession, they would think it's like a development control officer's role or just helping them approve housing extensions. But actually, our role is much more significant and positive. So it's very important for us to be advocate for the planning profession, to say what are the other things, especially the positive things we can do to transform our society.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I really like the analogy with the medical profession and being the doctors for the built environment. I think it's a really powerful message. And I suppose just moving forward, as you touched on the planning reform and the white paper, I think we have to talk about that, really, don't we? And I think there's been a lot of conversation about it, really, of course, of late, and there's been some big changes in that white paper's status, I think, really, in the recent months. And I suppose a simple question for you is, what do you think needs to be reformed in the planning system, if anything? And what are your sort of primary plans for change how you want to reimagine planning, if you will.
Yeah, I think for me, we have to see planning in a bigger planning. So it's not a small planning. So it's not only development control. It's really about what is the full potential of the planning profession and how we can fulfill that function better. For example, I think if you talk with local authorities, you will realize actually the planning department can really support the local economic growth, can support housing delivery, and can support the bigger environmental agenda and the social agenda. So it's really how I think there are a lot of potentials of the planning profession yet to be explored or understood by the government or other politicians. So I think the biggest thing I want to see is how we can use planning to achieve this systems approach to tackle the climate change and other social issues, because none of these issues can be resolved on its own right, and then only focus on a sector by sector basis or in a silo basis, the problem won't be resolved. So we really have to use planning as a key leverage to tackle this together.
Yeah, absolutely. I suppose just going a bit deeper into that, I suppose, and knocking on the door of COP26 as we're filming this towards the end of October, I think what can planning and indeed the planning profession do now and in the coming years to ensure a sort of more resilient future for people and a better relationship between settlements and the environment?
Yeah, so there are a lot of suggestions and recommendations from world leading scientists, and they are talking about we should think society, biodiversity, and climate change as coupled systems. So we have to tackle them all together. I think planning, as I said, has this unique function of thinking things comprehensively. And more importantly, we should really think long-term rather than short-term. We should think strategically rather than only on this silo basis. So planning can be strategic and can be localized. So really having this transition and also making the connection between policy and the placemaking is so important. Sometimes or quite often we have some very good policy written in words. They are very beautiful words, but they do not necessarily can be transferred into good places. So really, I think our profession is the built environment and natural environment profession, including planners, urban designers, architects, landscape architects. I think by working together collectively, we could build beautiful places lasting forever, and also at the same time, it's sustainable. So I think really this leadership role of planning, I think is really about forge a common sense of purpose, because we choose different professions for a reason. But I think the common reason is we want to do something good and feel good for our profession. So I think if we can join force together, we could achieve something much bigger and then fulfill a much bigger role.
So, yeah, very, very powerful point. I suppose the key things to take away from what you just said there for me is the sort of policy into action and the silo working, which you've sort of flagged as a negative, of course. And I know you're, as you've said, an urban designer, a member of the urban design group, and of course a planner, as am I. And I think lots of urban designers and members of the urban design group come from a planning background. But that being said, sort of planning departments and urban design departments sometimes end up focusing on different parts of the same big positive agenda, maybe not collaborating directly in some projects and some authorities or companies. I suppose, and even in some circumstances, end up working slightly at loggerheads. So I suppose, in terms of that, how do we grease the wheels of policy into action, and how do we break down that silo working? I mean, how do you think we can strengthen the links between planning and urban design, between planners and urban designers, and between planning and urban design as a profession, going forwards to sort of collectively champion this sort of urban prosperity we're fighting for?
Yeah, I think part of the thing I want to see in reimagining the planning profession is thinking beyond professional boundaries and beyond the present day. So I think our profession created for good reasons, because I think we need more expertise developed in certain area. But that doesn't mean we have to have barriers between our different professions. I'm a key advocate to promote joined up thinking between different professionals. So I think we need, although we don't need to be expert on every single aspect or different element, but we need to have an essential understanding about different profession. For example, I think for the planning profession, even your focus is on policy, you should have a good understanding about placemaking, about scale, because I think scale is so important. Even we apply the best leading policy, but in a wrong scale, in a wrong place, that would be terrible. So we really have to understand these placemaking principles. And this also equally, I think as urban designers, we need to understand how the design philosophy and then the beauty can be really embedded into the policy making and the plan making process. Make sure it's embedded properly into the whole process. So having this understanding, I think is very important. Once I saw a diagram somebody drew, I think that's a very useful diagram. So I think for our professions, it's like a T, a letter T. So somebody can have this very broad views or understanding of everything, or somebody can have quite in-depth understanding of a certain element. But nevertheless, we need to really have a general understanding about the whole picture. And then we need to learn from other professions as well. I learned a lot from transport professionals, learned from architects, and I even learned from journalists and politicians, because it's very important for us to articulate our language, our message properly with the general public and with politicians as well.
Now, finally, I know the Garden Town movement is really close to your heart, and indeed an area of your professional focus and expertise. That being so, bringing things together, like sort of placemaking and breaking down those silos and thinking of the bigger picture, what can we as urban designers, planners, and indeed the public learn from Ebenezer Howard in how we plan neighbourhoods, towns, and cities today and in the future?
Yeah, I think for Howard, if I put it into a very short sentence, it's very much focused on community itself. So it's a community-led development. And then the three essence about the garden cities is community engagement, self-governance, and also land value capture and the long-term stewardship. So this is very sustainable model to think about the long-term future. And when we talk about the garden cities or garden villages, I think we should not think only about the physical shape or form of what the historic garden cities they look like. It's really about the model of developing them. And it's a highly sustainable social economic model. For example, if I use a few examples, I think they are all 15 minutes walkable neighborhood. Mm-hmm. And also because of the land value capture model, they are very much self-sustained. For example, Letchworth Garden City, last year, their income is about 6 or 7 million pounds surplus. So that really has all been put back into the community building to support the local community in addition to the local government's support. And also more importantly, I think garden city model will be very relevant for our future because we are already stepping into an aging era. We cannot really think about, because by 2050, I think a quarter of our population will be over 65. So I will be over 70. So you cannot imagine a quarter of our population will live in residential institute. We just won't have enough people to look after us. So we really have to think about the accessible community model to look after everybody. And then there was a very important research carried out by Howard University. They followed 2 groups of people for 75 years. It's the longest research being done in history. So they found out what makes you happy. The secret of happiness is not about money and the power. It's really about a healthy social relationship. So I think that's the essence and the power of garden communities and garden cities. Having this community, very strong community governance structure will support everybody to live in a happy life and healthy life.
Thanks. It's a really powerful message, I think, in terms of how we have to design for an aging population and strengthen communities is really the answer, and all that goes with that in terms of transport, in terms of public realm and landscape, and in terms of the built form as well, and co-living. There's a lot that can be wrapped up in that. There's a really powerful message. So thank you. I always hate to cut these conversations short, but I'm afraid that's all the time we're going to have for today. So I just want to thank you very much again, and I look forward to speaking some more. I want to thank everyone who's listening into this as well. I hope you've enjoyed this episode of ideasSpace with the Urban Design Group, Urban Naus and me, Christopher Martin. And there's plenty more episodes coming your way, so please do get in touch if you have any questions and sign up to the Urban Design Group Urban Update to catch every conversation. Thanks, Wei, and thanks everyone.
Thank you very much.